Alonzo Mourning, the legendary NBA center, is one of the greatest defensive icons in basketball history. He began his outstanding career at Georgetown University, where he earned multiple All-American honors and won Big East Defensive Player of the Year 2 years in a row, making his mark with exceptional shot blocking and rebounding. Selected second overall in the 1992 NBA draft by the Charlotte Hornets, Mourning quickly proved himself an unstoppable warrior. Before being traded to the Miami Heat, where he became the defensive soul of the team, winning NBA Defensive Player of the Year twice, 1999-2000, making 7 All-Star appearances and earning multiple All-NBA First Team and All-Defensive Team selections. He was the cornerstone that led the Miami Heat to consecutive playoff appearances and reached the pinnacle with the NBA championship in 2006, even though his body had endured tremendous wear and tear by then. Mourning was inducted into the NBA Hall of Fame in 2014, a symbol of strength, perseverance, and relentless fighting spirit. Off the court, he founded the Mourning Family Foundation to help disadvantaged children with education and healthcare, creating a vibrant legacy in both sports and community service. But behind all the accolades and glory were silent struggles. Diagnosed with FSGS kidney disease in 2000, his career nearly ended. Surgeries, pain, and physical exhaustion forced him to confront the limits of his body. Feelings of helplessness, fatigue, and loneliness in the hospital room overwhelmed him. Yet Alonzo never gave up. He fought with every breath, every step, through physical therapy sessions and post-transplant recovery hours. Mourning's will was ironclad. He returned to the NBA, led his teammates, played with every ounce of remaining strength, and ultimately stood on the championship podium. Every rebound, every block was not just skill, but proof of his determination to survive and defy fate, showing that a person can overcome adversity and turn a betrayed body into an unyielding symbol of fight. After those glorious moments on the court and achievements any player would dream of, still cannot forget the earliest days of his life. Days without light, without applause, only loneliness and abandonment. From a very young age, his family fell apart, his parents divorced, leaving the boy Alonzo adrift among fragmented lives with no place truly called home. The house that should have been a shelter, a place to seek love and safety, became nothing but cold walls, silent hallways, and a heavy silence that seemed to swallow all his hope. His father, strict and harsh, was often busy with work, leaving an emotional void. His mother, exhausted from years of caregiving and holding the family together, could not offer him warm words of encouragement. Young Mourning soon realized that weakness would not be tolerated, and that to survive he had to protect himself in a world where everyone seemed to turn their backs. Those childhood days were filled with feelings of abandonment and having no one to protect him. In quiet moments alone in his small room, Alonzo felt profound loneliness. Footsteps fading away, indifferent adult figures, cold words, and the absence of any caring gesture. In those moments he learned to endure, to suffer without a single hand to lift him up. Every disappointment, every time he was left alone, taught him to forge his will, to force himself to toughen up, to hold his spirit steady in a challenging and unsafe environment. Anger and fear became invisible teachers, shaping the boy into someone who knew how to defend himself and refused to yield. Step by step, moment by moment, Alonzo learned to turn pain into strength, to stand firm when everything around him seemed to be collapsing. Those solitary days not only built his endurance, but also instilled a deep instinct for survival. Without basketball, without family to rely on, it was just him facing his fears and his desperate desire to exist. Alonzo learned to comfort himself, to keep his spirit strong when everything turned away. Every night, as the house sank into darkness, he experienced utter emptiness. But from that silence and loneliness, he forged a mental armor, learning to endure and to be resilient. Every abandonment, every disappointment forced him to harden further, to hold himself together against life's storms. Those quiet, unseen moments of solitude were exactly where the inner strength was born that would later carry him through every hardship in his career and life. That painful childhood, which seemed to bring only wounds, was actually the seedbed for Mourning's extraordinary resilience later on. He learned to rise despite being abandoned, to fight without protection, and most importantly, to survive events that no ordinary child should face. That very loneliness and lack of love shaped the future. Alonzo Mourning, a man not only strong on the court, but capable of enduring adversity, overcoming illness, and bearing failures that seemed unbearable. The key phrase echoes throughout his life like a constant reminder. Before he learned how to win, he had to learn how to survive. Every jump, every block, every return from injury or illness is proof that the abandoned boy once learned to survive and transformed suffering into an unbreakable inner strength. After those lonely and abandoned childhood years, Alonzo Mourning entered a new phase of life that few can imagine. Living in foster care, staying with a family that was never truly his. The new home brought no warmth or affection. Instead, cold walls, strict rules, and indifference replaced any comfort, turning it into a mentally challenging environment. Day after day, Mourning learned to live under harsh discipline without laughter or comforting hugs. The love he once craved seemed like a distant dream. Every mistake was punished with scolding or disappointed looks, and no one noticed the inner wounds he carried. In that environment, Mourning began to suppress his emotions, refusing to lash out, refusing to cry, and most importantly, refusing to depend on anyone. All protection came from himself alone. The feeling of having a house but no place to belong became a deep mark in Mourning's mind. The new home offered no support, no safety, that every child needs to grow normally. Every evening, as the small room fell into darkness, young Mourning felt stark loneliness. The steady ticking of the clock, distant footsteps, and a silence that seemed to drown all hope. Loneliness gradually became part of his character. He learned to self-soothe, to find ways to calm and protect his inner self. From this emotionally deprived environment, Mourning built inner resilience, learned to stand firm when everything seemed against him, and developed the capacity to endure pressures no ordinary child would ever face. The silent lessons in foster care came not from teaching or advice, but from harsh reality. If he wasn't tough, if he didn't endure, he would be hurt. He would not survive. Mourning learned to stay silent, to hide his tears, to turn pain into hidden strength. Every morning, waking up was a challenge. Complete tasks, follow rules, live without relying on anyone. Every small success, a rare compliment, a moment of confidence, a standout game was self-rewarded, self-nurtured, because no adult was ready to see or acknowledge his efforts. In that environment, Mourning also learned something crucial. Survival comes first through self-reliance. Everything else follows. In the coldness and strictness, he learned to control anger, manage emotions, and protect himself from further harm. Memories of foster care sank deep, becoming the foundation for the later Alonzo Mourning, who would enter the NBA as a warrior with iron will and the ability to endure any adversity. The loneliness, emotional deprivation, and insecurity of living in someone else's home forged a vital part of his identity, inner strength, and the capacity to withstand every challenge, both on the court and in life. And so, from those silent wounds, Alonzo Mourning understood that before learning to defeat opponents on the court, before overcoming seemingly impossible challenges, he first had to learn to survive in days without love and protection, where loneliness became an inseparable part of who he was. Those foster care years laid the groundwork for his mental strength, unyielding will, and ability to rise despite all odds, qualities that would later make him one of the greatest centers in NBA history. Alonzo Mourning, after those years living in foster care, carried within him not only loneliness but also a simmering anger that gradually became a mental armor protecting him from further possible wounds. That anger didn't erupt recklessly but quietly and steadfastly like an inner weapon against the deep-seated feelings of abandonment and insecurity from his childhood. Every time he faced injustice, every time he felt his efforts or worth went unrecognized, the anger rose up, helping him stand firm, maintain focus, and hold on to the will not to collapse. The fear of being abandoned became the drive that made Mourning always strive to control everything around him. from the way he trained his body, the way he prepared for each game, to the way he observed teammates and opponents. Everything had to be managed. Every detail had to be monitored, so no surprise could ever hurt him again like those early years. From that anger and fear, Mourning began building a tough, cold image or outer shell that anyone looking at saw only strength and dominance. But deep inside was a soul always tense, always on defense. He learned not to trust anyone, not to rely on anyone, bearing every pain on his own. Every game on the court, every grueling practice session, even every interaction with teammates was carefully controlled. He never showed any weakness, so no one could hurt him again. This very vigilance created a powerful and fearsome Mourning on the court. But at the same time, it isolated him from those around him, making close relationships difficult. And sometimes even his closest teammates felt the distance he created. Mourning's anger wasn't just a reaction to past wounds. It was also a survival tool, helping him channel energy, discipline himself, and turn pain into strength. Every jump, every block, every time he overpowered an opponent was a manifestation of that armor. Looking back, it's clear that his anger wasn't a weakness. It was how he survived. It helped him fight, helped him not fall before the trials life threw at him, from childhood abandonment to the brutal challenges in the NBA. And later, the battles with his body, illness, and the invisible pressures of fame. The combination of anger, self-discipline, and the ability to control his surroundings created an almost invincible Alonzo Mourning. A center who made opponents wary, but at the same time, a lonely man. Always tense, always preparing for every storm ahead. This was the foundation for the steel will and resilience that would carry Mourning through life's harshest adversities. From those foster care days to life-or-death kidney transplants, and finally standing on the pinnacle of glory with an indomitable spirit that the whole world admired. When he stepped into Georgetown University, Alonzo Mourning finally found a place where he felt his own value. The only place in his turbulent life that made him feel he belonged. Not because basketball was a passion or hobby, but because it was the only escape from the shadows of his childhood, from the feelings of abandonment, isolation, and misunderstanding. On the practice court and in every game, Mourning played not just to score points or beat opponents. He played as if fighting to survive, to prove to himself that the boy once abandoned, once lonely, could still stand firm and leave a mark in this world. Every jump, every block was an expression of survival instinct. And every stat on the scoreboard was merely the result of the inner strength he had forged from those foster care days. The inner pressure was always present. Every failure, no matter how small, meant losing a piece of the identity he had just found. A piece of the belief that he deserved to exist. Every game, every training hour carried a life or death feeling. If he didn't succeed, he would lose everything, not just fame, but his very sense of self-worth. And from that very pressure, Mourning learned focus, discipline, and body control, turning his defensive ability and physical power into an unbreakable weapon. Throughout his years at Georgetown, Mourning began building his reputation with ferocious blocks, outstanding rebounds, and defense that no opponent wanted to challenge. But even as people admired his achievements, he still carried old wounds, the pain of childhood and the loneliness that never left. Every victory on the court was an affirmation that he had survived every hurt. But it also reminded him that the scar in his heart was still there, quietly clinging, fueling determination and iron will for greater challenges ahead. For Mourning, basketball wasn't just a sport. It was where he learned to trust himself, to control fear, to turn anger and pain into strength, and most importantly, where he began to believe he belonged somewhere. A court where every effort had value. This was the foundation for the journey from an abandoned boy to a legendary center who would confront every adversity, overcome illness, and ultimately stand firm at the top of the NBA with an indomitable spirit the whole world admired. When he stepped into the NBA, Alonzo Mourning brought the image of a high-energy warrior who had endured the harsh trials of childhood and foster care, but now had to prove his strength before thousands of fans and formidable opponents. Every time he stepped onto the court, every jump, Every block seemed not just an effort to win against opponents, but also a battle with himself, with psychological scars that had never fully healed from years of abandonment and loneliness. Every gaze, every cheer, every scramble for the ball was turned by Mourning into energy to prove he could survive, that he could control his fate, at least on the court. Success came quickly in his first seasons with the Charlotte Hornets and then the Miami Heat. He became the defensive soul, winning Defensive Player of the Year awards, multiple All-Star selections, and recognition as one of the greatest defensive centers in NBA history. But even as victories piled up, the peace others thought Mourning had found never arrived. He didn't enjoy the accolades, didn't rejoice in the applause, but always carried fear. Fear of losing it all. Fear of being forgotten. Fear that opponents or injuries could strip away everything he had built. Every moment of success was laced with a quiet tension, a pounding heartbeat that never eased. The unhealed childhood wounds still quietly influenced him. Loneliness, abandonment, insecurity, all still there. Making Mourning never truly feel safe or satisfied. Even as a superstar on the surface, he always looked forward, always focused, but also always running from the ghosts of the past, the cold memories of days with no protection, no love. The defenses, the rebounds became ways to keep himself alive, ways to prove he wasn't defeated, that he still existed and was strong enough to keep fighting. He didn't climb to the top, he was running from the past. That statement isn't just commentary on his career, it's the living truth of Mourning. Every game, every season, every moment on the court carried the silent pain of childhood and the fear of losing control. No applause could erase the memories of loneliness and abandonment. Strength, speed, skill, titles all were just means for Mourning to protect himself, to fight the unseen ghosts of the past. While teammates celebrated victories, Mourning kept a distance in his soul, never allowing himself to fully blend in because every joy came with anxiety. Every win was a reminder. I have to maintain, I have to stand firm. Failure is not allowed. Rapid success didn't bring happiness. It only highlighted the gap between the outer image of superstar, a great warrior, and the inner world where the abandoned, lonely boy still fought to survive. Mourning's early NBA career wasn't just a journey to conquer opponents. It was a journey to overcome himself, battling old pain, silent loneliness, and cold memories etched deep in his mind. Every block, every scramble, every victory carried deeper meaning. It wasn't just winning on the scoreboard, but an affirmation that Alonzo Mourning was still alive, still fighting, still strong, despite a past that once tried to swallow him whole. This inner strength, forged from foster care days and a broken childhood, helped Mourning not only stand firm, but gradually etch his name in NBA history as a symbol of resilience, endurance, and unyielding will. When entering the peak years with the Miami Heat, Alonzo Mourning wasn't just a player. He was the icon of defensive power, resilience, and unrelenting fighting spirit. Every game at American Airlines Arena became a total battle, not just against opponents, but against himself, against childhood memories, against the silent pains that had followed him since foster care. Mourning dominated the paint with powerful blocks, rebounds that gave opponents no chance, and every time he leapt to contest a shot, the entire arena seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the pent-up energy to explode from a man who had endured countless trials just to survive. The games became explosive emotional moments where Mourning showed not just skill, but the anger and survival will forged from an abandoned childhood. The inner tension, fear of failure, and pressure to maintain his reputation made him almost never allow himself to let up. Every battle for position was a test of will, every block proof that he was still strong, still standing despite unhealed wounds and fatigue from long seasons. Emotions erupted not only on the court, but showed clearly in his eyes and handshakes with teammates, in every tense breath before a decisive shot. Famous rivalries, especially with Patrick Ewing and the New York Knicks, became a key part of Mourning's image. Every matchup with Ewing wasn't just a regular basketball game, but a spiritual and physical war where every collision, every jump, every defensive stand was fueled by pain, anger, and the desire to prove himself. Mourning never showed weakness, never let an opponent gain the upper hand because every game was a chance to face himself, to affirm he could still control his fate, at least on the court. Mourning became the symbol of strength for the entire Miami Heat team, but also the image of controlled anger, of a man always tense, always vigilant, always battling inner ghosts. The jumps, blocks, and scrambles all carried meaning, not just protecting the rim, not just protecting teammates, but protecting himself from old pains. It was thanks to that anger and inner strength that Mourning became one of the greatest defensive centers in NBA history, someone opponents feared and fans admired. Every game in the Miami Heat's peak era was proof of his ability to turn pain into power, showing how Mourning transformed childhood wounds, abandonment, loneliness, and pressure into a life-or-death drive. Even when earning individual honors, Defensive Player of the Year, All-Star, All-NBA First Team, Mourning never stopped struggling with himself, with the limits his body and mind imposed. Every defensive stand, every jump, every rebound was a reminder that he wasn't just playing to win games, but playing to prove he still stood firm, that he still existed, that he was still strong against all the trials shaped by his childhood and every event he had endured. Every game is a battle with himself. That saying became the guiding principle in every step Mourning took on the court. It wasn't just opponents, not just the scoreboard or titles, but himself, his will, his unhealed pain, his anger and survival desire. And thanks to these battles, Mourning gradually built the image of an unconquerable warrior who would go on to overcome even harsher adversities in the future, illness, injuries, and the greatest challenge of his life,